Under the silver glow of a full moon, the forest lay hushed, save for the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Two vampire sisters, Celine and Isolde, moved like whispers along the mossy banks of a meandering stream. Their steps were silent, their senses attuned to every subtle shift in the night. They had ventured from their ancient stronghold in search of whispered rumors, sightings of a lone werewolf who roamed these woods under the lunar light. As they crept forward, the scent of damp earth mingled with the heady aroma of night-blooming flowers, the scent promising both danger and discovery. Suddenly, Isolde halted, her ebony cloak rustling as she held up a slender hand. The scent had sharpened, transforming into a deep, musky note that spoke of fur and raw power. Celine followed her sister's gaze and saw, framed by the moonlight, a lone figure kneeling in a shallow pool of water. He was naked, his silvered hair cascading over broad shoulders as he lathered his skin with rushing water. Moonbeams caressed every contour of his form, revealing muscles that rippled beneath pale skin. Neither sister had ever witnessed a werewolf so exposed, so vulnerable. Their hearts stirred with a curious blend of tension and fascination. Isolde's breath hitched as she watched the werewolf continue his ritual of cleansing, unaware of her gaze. The nocturnal shadows rendered portions of his form in silhouette, while other parts glowed ghostly under the moon's touch. Celine's crimson eyes flicked from shoulder to arm to the curve of his back, noting the quiet grace with which he moved. Isolde, torn between instinctual caution and unspoken curiosity, felt her pulse quicken. They remained motionless, held in thrall by the scene unfolding before them. Then, almost imperceptibly, the werewolf's posture shifted. Muscles tensed, and bones seemed to creak as his human form began to transform. Isolde's eyes widened as she witnessed the subtle change, fingers elongating, hair thickening. The moonlight danced across his shifting silhouette, painting him in a dance of shadow and light. Celine watched intently, mesmerized by the raw power bubbling beneath that skin. The sisters felt an ancient thrill course through their veins. Witnessing a transformation was a rare privilege, a secret dance of nature most creatures never beheld. The werewolf, now sensing the shift in the air, raised his head. His eyes, golden orbs set against a face already marked by lupin features, flicked toward the stream's edge. In that instant, he saw the faint glimmer of two pale figures. Time seemed to slow as he rose from the water, droplets cascading from his fur. Despite the fierceness etched into his features, there was a moment of surprise, an unguarded human hesitation. His gaze met Isolde's and then Celine's, reflecting instinctual caution and a flicker of awareness that they were present. The sisters froze, hearts pounding. Neither vampire made a sound. The werewolf's form, half shrouded in shadows, radiated strength and solemn grace. The moonlight traced every ridge of his body as he stood fully upright, towering in both stature and silent dignity. His breath misted in the cool night air. For a heartbeat, predator and phantom, vampire and werewolf, stood separated only by the thin veil of darkness. Then, as though deciding against confrontation, the werewolf turned with a fluid motion and disappeared into the depths of the forest. The sisters watched his retreating form until he melted into the night, leaving them trembling with wonder, their curiosity aflame. Under the thick canopy of ancient oaks, Celine and Isolde moved with silent purpose, their senses attuned to every whisper of wind and rustle of underbrush. The scent of the werewolf guided them deeper into the forest, a potent mixture of damp fur, sweat, and musk that clung to the cool night air. Celine's heart pounded with excitement, while Isolde's mind wrestled between caution and fascination. They were predators by birth, yet something about this lone creature stirred a curious empathy within Isolde. As they followed the winding path, moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting mottled patterns across the forest floor. Isolde's pale hand brushed against a rough tree trunk as she leaned forward, straining to hear any hint of movement. Celine moved close behind, her crimson eyes flicking between the shadows, ready to strike if danger approached. But Isolde hesitated. The idea of harming this werewolf, especially after witnessing his vulnerable moment by the stream, felt wrong. Still, a sense of duty propelled them forward. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from a fallen branch under Celine's foot. The werewolf, resting atop a fallen log ahead, lifted his head. His golden eyes narrowed as he sensed their presence, every muscle tensing under pale fur. His nostrils flared, nostrils stark against his shadowed face. Isolde felt a pang of remorse as she watched him rise slowly, limbs coiling with latent power. He was caught between man and beast, torn by the rumbling transformation that lay dormant even now. The sisters froze, but the werewolf did not attack. Instead, he took a wary step forward, bare feet stirring moonlit dust. Isolde swallowed hard, her throat dry. She raised a hand in a gesture of peace, voice caught between apology and fear. "We mean no harm," she whispered, barely audible. The werewolf's gaze flickered toward Celine, lips curling into a low growl. An instinctive warning hissed through his half-formed snarl, yet his eyes betrayed something more than rage, something that hinted at recognition or longing. Before more could unfold, the werewolf lunged. Time slowed as he propelled himself forward, claws aimed at Celine's cloak. Isolde reacted instinctively, grabbing Celine's arm and pulling her back with supernatural speed. The two vampire sisters scattered like wisps of smoke, their cloaks swirling around them. Leaves and twigs crackled underfoot as Celine recovered, extending her arms to reveal twin blades that glinted faintly in the moonlight. Yet even as she prepared to strike, the werewolf's posture held hesitation, an acknowledgement of something unspoken between predator and prey. In that charged moment, Isolde stepped forward into the clearing, her eyes locked on the werewolf's golden gaze. "Stop," she murmured, voice trembling yet firm. "There is no need for bloodshed." The werewolf paused, nostrils flaring as he struggled to contain the transformation yearning beneath his skin. Beneath the moon's brilliant glow, his muscles quivered, bones itching for change. Isolde's gaze softened, offering understanding rather than vengeance. For a fleeting instant, their souls connected, bridging centuries of animosity. Then, with a guttural roar that shook the treetops, the werewolf turned and bounded away, disappearing into the dense copse. The sisters stood motionless, breathless as the echoes of his departure faded. Celine lowered her blades, eyes fixed on the vanishing shape. Isolde exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and regret mingling in her chest. They had glimpsed something extraordinary, a creature torn between worlds, guided by instincts and yet seeking compassion. As the forest settled into silence once more, the sisters shared a solemn glance, each feeling the ripples of destiny stirring in the moonlit night. Under the pale light of dawn, Isolde stirred on a bed of damp leaves, her body aching from the night's chase. The mist clung to her skin as she pushed herself upright, fingers brushing against fresh bruises along her ribs. Alone in the twilight, she felt both fear and determination. The scent of the werewolf lingered in the air, a heady blend of wild musk and residual fear. Though Celine had retreated to their ancestral castle to bear news of what occurred, Isolde remained fixated on him. She would track him, not for vengeance, but to understand the secrets he carried. Meanwhile, Celine's return to the castle had been met with stern disapproval. Lady Celestine, their matriarch, listened to her account with narrowed eyes, each detail of the werewolf's form stoking her ancient prejudices. In the grand hall, where candle flames flickered against cold stone walls, Celine's voice trembled as she described his vulnerability. Naked in the moonlit stream, muscles glistening under moonbeams, golden eyes reflecting both fear and defiance. But Lady Celestine saw only a beast, an old enemy destined to spread chaos among vampire bloodlines. Isolde's absence that morning spoke volumes. Though Celine voiced concern, neither sister wished to see him harmed without cause. Far beyond the castle's spired silhouette, The werewolf lay shrouded in ragged cloth within the hollow of an uprooted oak. His transformation back to human form had been excruciating, bones crackling, fur receding, until ragged skin revealed wounds both physical and emotional. He tasted blood in his mouth, recalling the sharp scent as he fled. Panic and shame twisted in his gut. Vampires were hunters of his kind, and their presence had shattered his fleeting hope of safety. With trembling hands, he used moss and battered cloth to conceal himself, every breath a reminder of his fractured duality. Memories of their pale faces and glowing eyes invaded his mind. He questioned whether escape was merely a temporary reprieve. Isolde, guided by instinct, found herself at the edge of Slender Glen as morning light seeped through the trees. She spotted scraps of fabric nestled among crushed ferns, remnants of his cloak or hastily patched rags. Crouching, her fingertips traced the torn fibers, and a drop of dry blood clung to a bent twig. Her heart quickened. He had been here, wounded and desperate. The forest around her awakened. Birdsong mingled with rustling undergrowth, and dew-laden leaves glistened. Though daylight was her enemy in most matters, she felt strangely comforted by its warmth. In those clues lay his trail. With cautious steps, Isolde followed the faint path sloping downward toward a silent creek. Morning birds scattered as she passed, and the forest exhaled a mossy fragrance. She recalled the way he had watched her as he retreated, surprise warring with sorrow in his gaze. Despite her lineage and purposes, empathy welled within her. She sensed a deeper story behind his lone existence, a curse unbidden, a fate shared by few, and perhaps a destiny that entwined them beyond mere chance. As the sun began to cast slender beams through the canopy, Isolde pressed onward, moving toward his last known refuge. The forest floor softened beneath her steps, and somewhere ahead, a low growl betrayed his proximity. This morning held secrets yet to be revealed, and Isolde braced herself for what lay ahead. Guided by compassion and an instinct older than any grudge, she vowed to uncover the truth behind a werewolf's curse, and to confront the destiny that bound their fates beneath the light of day. Under a sky fringed with fading twilight, Isolde moved with careful footsteps, her senses finely tuned to every whisper of the forest. The mossy floor beneath her feet yielded soft sounds, guiding her toward a clearing she felt in her bones. There, hidden by a tangle of briars, stood an ancient stone circle. Pillars of weathered rock, etched with runic symbols older than memory, rose like sentinels from the earth. Vines crept along their surfaces as if nature itself sought to cradle them. Isolde's breath quickened. Somewhere within that circle, the werewolf awaited. Stepping into the glade, Isolde's heart pounded. The cool air held a charged energy. Runic symbols glowed faintly, as if awakened by her presence. The werewolf crouched beside a broken pillar, half shrouded in shadow. His figure was in flux, one moment human, the next a lithe lupin form. Bones creaked beneath thinning fur, and sinew shifted in a fluid, frightening dance. Golden eyes flicked toward Isolde, reflecting an aching wariness. Despite his wounds, each breath he took sent ripples through the runic glow, causing the air to hum. "I did not come to fight," Isolde whispered, stepping closer. Her voice wavered with both resolve and unease. The werewolf's jaw tensed, fangs partially exposed. Instincts warred within him, to flee, to defend, to attack. Isolde raised her hands slowly, palms open in a gesture of peace. Moonlight, lingering at the edge of darkness, illuminated her pale face. "There is more to you than legend and fear," she continued. "I wish only to know the truth behind your curse." At her words, the runes flared. Spectral chains, threads of silver light, snaked from the pillars and coiled around the werewolf's limbs. He roared, a sound that struck the earth with tremors. His form convulsed, half human, half wolf, as arcane bonds lurched him into a forced stillness. Pain etched across his features, sweat and fur matted into wet clumps. Isolde's heart clenched. Centuries of enmity surged within her court. Yet here, in this secret glade, she felt only compassion. "Hold fast," the werewolf rasped, eyes blazing with agony. Isolde knelt beside him, pressing her hand to the nearest rune. Her fingertips glowed with a faint warmth, an echo of her own bloodline's ancient gifts. She murmured an incantation passed down through her family, the language of light and binding, spoken only in moments of dire need. Flames flickered at the rune's edges as she applied gentle pressure. Spectral bonds around him trembled, threatened by her touch. Suddenly, a shout pierced the air. Malachi emerged from the tree-lean, clad in obsidian armor, eyes burning with righteous fury. "Traitor," he bellowed, "you consort with the enemy of our kind." His voice ricocheted off the stones. Isolde turned, blade of ebony drawn in a single fluid motion. "Step back," she warned, voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is not your fight." Malachi advanced, fangs gleaming. Isolde braced herself, straddling the line between protector and exile. As Malachi lunged, the werewolf, still bound, growled in pain and defiance. Sensing the moment to free him, Isolde channeled every ounce of strength into her incantation. With a crack that split the night, the rune shattered, and spectral chains dissolved into drifting motes of silver light. Freed at last, the werewolf collapsed to his knees, fur ruffled, body trembling. Isolde knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Malachi, enraged, raised his blade. Isolde's blade met his in a clash of metal and will. Sparks flew as they circled one another beneath the ancient stones. The werewolf, recovering his balance, stood and faced Malachi with a quiet intensity. There, in the hallowed glade, three beings bound by fate and blood prepared for the moment that would shape the night's destiny. Under the pale glow of the moon, the silver chains tightened around the werewolf's limbs, wrapping him in strands of ghostly light. Pain surged through his body as his muscles convulsed, half transforming into Lupin fur even as the spectral bonds held him fast. The runic symbols etched into the ancient stones pulsed with power, feeding the spell that bound him. Isolde knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she pressed against the nearest rune. She began to chant words passed down from her foremothers, a delicate incantation intended to unravel the binding magic. "Hold on," Isolde murmured, her voice soft yet determined. "I will free you." The werewolf's golden eyes, filled with anguish, locked onto hers. Despite his suffering, he nodded once, as though entrusting his fate to her gentle touch. Isolde's palm glowed faintly, a warm light that countered the argent hue of chains. As she continued to speak the archaic syllables, flames of silver danced along the rune's edges, flickering with each syllable. The chains strained and writhed, snapping one by one like brittle twigs. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the tree-lean, a cold, contemptuous hiss that froze the air. "Betrayal." Malachi stepped forward, his long cloak swirling around him like a raven's wing. In his hand, he held a ceremonial dagger, its blade black as midnight. His eyes blazed with fanaticism as he approached the clearing, every movement radiating contempt. "You would dare to meddle with our ancient laws?" he demanded, his tone harsh enough to reverberate through the glade. Isolde rose, her hand moving instinctively to draw her slender obsidian blade. "Step back," she warned, voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "This is not your place." Malachi's lips curled into a sneer. "You shelter the beast that defiled our kind," he spat. "By the covenant, he must be destroyed." With a swift motion, he leaped forward, aiming for the werewolf's heart. In that moment, the werewolf let out a roar, a guttural sound that shook the ancient stones. Fueled by newfound strength, he lunged upward, breaking free of the last fragment of silver chain. Isolde moved to place herself between Malachi and the werewolf, raising her blade. But before she could intercept, Celine emerged from the shadows, twin swords drawn. Her crimson eyes burned with resolve. "Mother will not stand for this treachery," Celine declared, voice ringing across the clearing. She raised her blades, blocking Malachi's path. Sparks flew as black steel met cold iron, the clang echoing through the silent woods. Malachi staggered under the force of the clash, his dagger shattering against Celine's sword. The werewolf, freed and still trembling, rose to his full height. His lupin fur receded, leaving him in human form, naked, wounded, but alive. Bruises marred his skin, and dried blood traced lines down his torso. Isolde knelt to support him, draping her cloak over his shoulders, shielding him from the chill. He met her gaze, gratitude, and something deeper shimmering in his amber eyes. Malachi snarled and lunged again, but Celine intercepted with a deft strike that sent his dagger clattering to the forest floor. Isolde pressed her hand against the werewolf's back, lending him her strength. Together, they faced the older vampire. A hush fell over the glade as the two sisters and the werewolf stood united against the traitor. "The prophecy foretells his coming." Isolde spoke softly, her eyes never leaving Malachi's. "It is not our choice to destroy him." Malachi's face twisted with rage. For a heartbeat, time held its breath. Then, with a final glare, he retreated into the shadows, vowing vengeance. As his form melted into the forest's darkness, the werewolf let out a sigh of relief. Isolde helped him to his feet, supporting him as he steadied himself. Celine sheathed her swords, the tension in her shoulders easing. The silver-runed circle around them faded into stillness, leaving only the echo of their breaths and the distant hoot of an owl. In that moment, beneath the silent watch of ancient trees, a fragile allegiance formed, a vampire, her sister, and a werewolf bound by destiny. The night's trials had revealed betrayal and sacrifice, yet also the promise of something more, an alliance that would shift the balance between their warring kin. As the moon dipped toward dawn, they knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but they would face it together, guided by the unbreakable bond forged in moonlit steel and whispered magic. Under a sky streaked with fading stars, Isolde and the werewolf found refuge in the cool shadows of her ruined manor's crypt. The damp stone walls exhaled centuries of memories, and the air smelled of earth and ancient secrets. Isolde guided him to a tattered blanket laid upon a carved stone altar. His body trembled from the strain of breaking the spectral bonds, and he winced as Isolde gently examined the wounds along his limbs. Though he had reverted to human form, faint patches of fur clung to his skin, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. She pressed a soft cloth to a deep gash on his arm, her fingers moving with both urgency and tenderness. "You are safe here," she whispered, her voice echoing in the dim chamber. The werewolf nodded, eyes heavy with gratitude, but clouded by confusion. "Why did you save me?" he asked, voice hushed and raspy. Isolde lowered herself beside him, arranging a small lamp carved from bone at the altar's edge. Its flickering flame cast gentle shadows across her pale face. "Because I saw not a monster, but a soul in pain," she replied. "And because there is truth in you that my heart cannot ignore." He searched her eyes, as though seeking reassurance. After a long moment, he exhaled and sank against the cold stone. Isolde drew a dusty scroll from beneath a wooden chest nearby, unrolling it carefully. The parchment crackled, and faded runes shimmered under the lamp's glow. "My grandmother taught me of an ancient prophecy," Isolde began, tracing a fingertip along the cursive symbols. "It speaks of one born of both vampire lineage and wolf blood, a child who would hold the power to unite our warring clans." The werewolf leaned forward, leaning on one hand as he tried to steady himself. "You believe I am that child?" he asked quietly. Isolde's chest rose and fell as she nodded. "The signs point to you. Your eyes, golden like the moonlit fur of the wolf, and your uncanny strength that rivaled both man and beast. There is more. When you shattered the silver bindings, the runes glowed in a pattern matching these words, two-blooded heir of night and moon. She pointed to a passage where runes converged into an intricate knot, symbolizing union between wolf and vampire. Only one fitting that description could break the ancient spell. His gaze dropped to the floor, thoughts racing. "I never knew my mother," he murmured. "I was raised by the wolves, never part of a pack or a court." Whispers hinted at a human woman who lived near the edge of these woods, but no one spoke her name. Isolde's fingertips trembled as she gently closed the scroll. "Your mother was a werewolf. Your father, a vampire who fell in love against all laws. Their union was secret, forbidden. I believe she fled with you when you were a child, hiding to protect you." She reached out, touching his hand. "They sacrificed everything so you might live." He swallowed hard, a cascade of emotions flooding him. Sorrow for parents never known, relief for truths finally uncovered. Isolde's heart ached at his pain. "I am sorry," she said softly. He squeezed her hand, voice low but resolute. "I am grateful. But what now? How do I fulfill this prophecy?" Isolde rose and retrieved a small silver pendant from beneath a folded cloth. The pendant bore an engraved motif, half a wolf's head merged with a bat's wing. "Wear this," she instructed, lowering it around his neck. "It is the symbol of unity. With it, you'll be recognized by those who still hold hope for peace." As dawn approached, the first pale light filtered through cracks in the crypt ceiling. Isolde and the werewolf shared a moment of quiet understanding. Their destinies intertwined, bound by ancient bloodlines and a prophecy that could reshape both vampire and wolf clans. Though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, they knew that together they held the key to a future beyond centuries of conflict. With resolve forged in revelation and compassion, they prepared to step into a world that awaited the rising of the two-blooded heir. Under the muted glow of a blood moon, a legion of vampire knights arrayed themselves at the manor's gates. Their armor, dark as midnight, reflected the crimson light, each movement sounding a menacing promise. The chimes of midnight echoed as the siege began. Isolde, clutching the werewolf's arm, slipped through a concealed passage beneath the manor's charred ruins. Beside them, Celine and a small band of vampire allies, those who chose compassion over age-old hatred, emerged from shadowed corridors. United, they fled toward the distant ruins of an ancient abbey, a place where werewolf kin had once found sanctuary. The forest around them trembled as the vampire horde pressed forward. Celine drew twin blades that danced like wraiths in her hands, turning aside the first wave of pursuers. Isolde, her heart pounding, guided the werewolf, still healing from his broken chains, through twisting roots and treacherous undergrowth. They reached the abbey's shattered entrance as Gothic spires collapsed in moonlit silence. Within its broken nave, columns leaned like weary sentinels, and scattered stones bore silent witness to centuries of conflict. Inside, Celine stood firm against advancing vampire zealots. Steel rang against steel as fangs gleamed with deadly intent. Isolde and the werewolf knelt before an ancient statue of a wolf, its eyes carved from moonstone. Kneeling on the cold, fragment-littered floor, they placed their hands upon the scroll containing the prophecy. The runes intertwined like living vines, their silver glow awakening beneath Isolde's touch. The werewolf's eyes shimmered, recalling his dual heritage, as Isolde's blood pulsed with warmth against her pale skin. Malachi burst into the nave, eyes blazing with fury. In his hand, he clutched a ceremonial sword whose edge hummed with forbidden power. "You dare invoke witchcraft to aid the abomination?" he thundered. With a swift arc, he aimed for Isolde's heart. But the runic barrier, a lattice of moonlight, sprang to life, intercepting his strike. Sparks flickered as blade met barrier, and Malachi recoiled, shock and rage contorting his face. In that moment, the werewolf rose, his form blurred between man and beast, fur bristling as he expanded into a towering figure, muscles coiling, limbs elongating into powerful limbs. His roar reverberated through the abbey like distant thunder, shaking dust from vaulted ceilings. Despite his raw power, There was a controlled grace, as though centuries of hidden strength now flowed through his veins. Isolde stood at his side, her presence steady and unwavering, light pulsing from her veins like starlight cocooning her form. Malachi lunged again, but the werewolf met him mid-air with a surge of irresistible force. Dagger and armor splintered under impact. Metal clanged before scattering into the dust. Stripped of his weapon, Malachi knelt, shoulders heaving, as the prophecy's magic enveloped him. Ancient words echoed through the nave, spoken by voices long silent, declaring unity between night's hunters and moonlit guardians. As dawn's first pale rays touched the broken archways, the vampire knights wavered. Those who had followed Malachi faltered, witnessing the barrier dissolve and an uneasy truce settle across the abbey. Celine lowered her blades, breathing heavy, as the remaining zealots dropped their weapons. Isolde reached out her hand. The werewolf's golden eyes softened, reflecting both relief and cautious hope. Together, beneath arches etched by time and stone, vampire and werewolf found a fragile peace. The prophecy's power had shattered ancient edicts, forging a new path where hatred once thrived. The survivors looked toward a future that would be shaped not by old grudges, but by the possibility of shared dawns in a world reborn. Under the first gentle hue of dawn, the shattered abbey stood silent, as though suspended between night and morning. Columns, worn by time, reached upward to a pale sky, their shattered arches framing the rising sun. The air held a hush, an uneasy peace settling over vampire and werewolf alike. All eyes turned toward Isolde and the werewolf standing before the ancient wolf statue, their silhouettes etched in soft golden light. Isolde stepped forward, her pale skin glinting with morning dew. She raised the werewolf's hand and placed it atop the stone wolf's head. His gaze, once clouded by conflict, now shone with purpose. Around them, their unlikely allies watched with wary gratitude. Vampires who had chosen compassion over bloodlust, and werewolves who embraced the hope of reconciliation. The prophecy's echoes lingered, a promise of unity that had shattered centuries of distrust. With a shared breath, Isolde and the werewolf turned toward the gathered crowd. She spoke in a voice clear and steady, her words carrying across the cold stone. Today, we stand as proof that hearts can mend where old wounds bled for generations. Let this day mark the beginning of a new age. Her hand released his, and he stepped forward, his bearing regal despite his worn state. He lowered his head in respect, acknowledging both clans. In response, the werewolves knelt upon dew-soaked ground, howling in a deep, resonant chorus that echoed through the abbey's ruins. The sound was neither feral nor menacing. It carried hope and resolve. Vampires, eyes aglow with curiosity and relief, bowed their heads in return, accepting a bond once thought impossible. The air seemed to shimmer as the barriers forged by hate dissolved like morning mist. As the howl subsided, the werewolf approached Isolde. He offered a gentle smile, tired but genuine. She met him halfway, and their lips met in a tender kiss that blended immortal stillness with living warmth. In that moment, the sun's rays bathed them in light, as if nature itself blessed their union. Onlookers felt a subtle shift within their spirits. Fear gave way to wonder, suspicion to cautious optimism. Behind them, Celine watched with pride, her crimson eyes softened by dawn. Though no words passed between her and Malachi, now humbled and exiled, her presence symbolized the fragile trust that had formed. Traditions shattered, they all sensed the gravity of the day. No longer would vampires hunt werewolves simply for their nature, nor would werewolves retaliate blindly. Instead, both would walk forward as allies bound by choice. The werewolf spoke then, his voice steady yet gentle. We shall rebuild what was lost. Where darkness reigned, light will now take root. He extended his hand toward Isolde once more, and she joined him at the statue. Together, they placed their fingers upon the engraved runes. The carvings flared with a soft silver glow, and though no magic spilled outward, the symbol of unity stood clear, a wolf merging with a bat's wing, etched in stone. As the sun climbed higher, the forest beyond the abbey stirred. Birdsong broke through silence, and gentle breezes carried fallen leaves in swirling patterns. A pack of young werewolves emerged at the tree-line, followed by vampire acolytes bearing offerings of herbs and blooms. Both moved forward without hesitation, converging in the abbey's courtyard. Hands clasped across former divides, they formed a circle around the statue. In the warm light of dawn, vampire and werewolf kin pledged themselves to honor the new covenant, to protect one another and nurture a world where old enmities no longer dictated fate. Isolde and her beloved stood at the heart, their joined hands lifted high. Above them, the morning sky stretched vast and unchallenged, a canvas for futures yet unwritten. And so, in that ancient place reborn by hope, their story became legend, the dawn of the twin blood, where love and courage bridged endless night and fierce moonlight.